Hey everybody. I'm going to speak specifically to the preparation phase for the WildMind Deep Nature Immersion. I know I've mentioned it in other videos, but I want to speak now to what that actually means, why it's important, and the kind of the bits and pieces that we'll be covering in that 3-month lead up to our gathering here in Scotland in June. First of all, it's important to say that, again, as we approach such an undertaking, we will experience different kind of layers of awareness of it. So we might have it's quite common for people, if they are of a mind and looking for something of this ilk, to have an initial emotional response to it, which is like, oh, I've got to do that, and they start moving towards it. And then other parts of them kind of get involved in the conversation and start providing all the very good reasons why not to do it, or start to bargain. And bargaining is the start of any significant change process. We really know that something significant is at stake for us when the bargaining begins. So I had a guy years ago who came along, and I've been speaking to him for 3 or 4 months, and he'd been speaking with some other people on email. There was no way he could not have known if there was a fasting aspect to it, and yet the night before the fasting started, he was really adamant that he didn't know that, and gave me a very comprehensive list of all the reasons why it was not possible for him to do it. And he sabotaged his process, and he tried to sabotage everybody else's process too. So it's a tricksy thing. So to make sure that doesn't happen again, and that everyone is clear, and not just clear, but also has a sense of confidence in the process itself, not the specific outcome, because that remains uncertain and is unique and individual for us, but learns to trust that there is a method to the madness as we open this conversation and begin to move gently, slowly, each in our own ways forward with it. The way that the Deep Nature Immersion has happened previously, there's been kind of several different expressions of it. The crudest version is we don't have any upfront contact with our fellow delegates, and we arrive in Scotland, and that's the first time we really meet them and start having conversations, and then we undergo the process, and then everyone leaves. It's still a very powerful experience, but in my experience of having run it a different way a couple of times, it's not the richest experience it could be. So obviously the extra duration and the amount of input increases the cost, but it also is a better investment overall by a country mile, and this is why. So we begin in March, and even before March, people, as soon as they pay their deposit, will start to notice, they will start to have in their awareness, there's this thing happening in the future that I'm committed to. I'm kind of heading in this direction. And I would say that is what we call a psychoactive process. So they might start having dreams, they might start remembering certain aspects from their life. Their psyche will start to present them with the various bits and pieces of their lives, of their intention, might start to clarify from a place of curiosity. It's not a sitting down writing a bullet list of 10 points, I want this and this and this and this. That might come out of it, but it's generally a much more subtle and indirect process as the psyche starts to kind of stir and say, okay, so there's an invitation for me to move into a deeper relationship with the world through this individual, through my host, if you like, and I'm going to respond to that, and the psyche will respond to that invite, absolutely. will respond to it, and it is benevolent, however bumpy it might be or feel. So the preparation serves several functions that support us during our time in Scotland, but also, and more importantly, although it all kind of mixes in together, but crucially it supports our incorporation, which is what happens after our time in Scotland. So in March, as we gather online, we will basically start to get to know our traveling companions, right? The other people who have signed up for this journey. And it's not just a simple case of, it's nice to meet you. We're going to be sharing at depth. So whatever we're comfortable with, we'll be kind of like, yeah, this is where I am in my life. This is what is kind of calling me to this at this time. These are the things that I would like to get from it. These are the questions I've got. And hearing other people speak in that way stirs things in us. We're like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that's important for me too. Or, no, that's definitely not what's important for me. I'm definitely more in this direction than that direction. And it's important to say the process is a very powerful, and I will use this word very intentionally because I know it's used in far too many places without efficacy, I would say. The journey is transformational. So it will mirror and amplify what you want to bring to consciousness. It will show it to you, and our preparation helps us attune to, interpret and embody that wisdom, that information, those insights, that understanding in a way that's useful to us, in a way that's meaningful to us, in a way that helps us with whatever particular intention we have, whether that's a healing intention or whether that's just like, I want to kind of step my life up and move into a different quality of relationship, or whatever it is. It might just be I want to live. It can be really very primal in its capacities for holding that level of depth. So so we meet people and we hear other people's stories, and that kind of gives us a sense of I'm not the only crazy person signing up for this crazy thing. And I say crazy only in as much as it's countercultural, right? There aren't a lot of people running around going, oh yeah, I'm going to go and fast on my own in nature for 4 days and 4 nights. Just seemed like a good idea. There's significant depth to that process, right? And there's not a lot of people doing it. So that's why if you go hang out with your mates or your family members and say, this is what I'm going to do, they'll kind of raise an eyebrow and go, oh, that's nice, dear. You might get that kind of response. Anyway, so it's good to have other people who share the same kind of sense of invitation and possibility that we do. And then, as well as that, and that process really is happening in the background all the time. It's not like get to know each other and bare your soul. It's not at all like that. It's like, okay, how do we find our way into this conversation, knowing other people are finding their way into the conversation too? And where am I the same as others? Where am I similar? And where am I different? What are my motivations? How do I articulate them? And how can I be inspired by others' efforts to do the same thing, each in our own ways, right? We're not looking for a homogenous experience by any stretch of the imagination. So whilst that is happening in the background, my focus is to explain and help us have experiences and cultivate our own ways to engage with these different facets of human consciousness as I understand them, coming out of 30,000 hours of one-to-one psychotherapy time with clients, working with large groups, communities, rites of passage for men and boys, my own time in wilderness locations around the world, different cultures, many indigenous processes that I have witnessed and been invited to participate in. How do we structure ourselves what does it mean to be a conscious human being, and what different facets of intelligence help us express and structure and bring order to that consciousness. And that might sound like a little bit wordy and psychobabble, but this is what it boils down to, in my understanding, is there are different layers to us. And that's not a new concept. I'm sure if you're listening or watching this, you kind of have some basic understanding of that. So we have a rational cognitive intellect, our brain, this thing between our ears, incredibly powerful for comprehending and understanding what's happening around us in terms of the social norms and patterns and models, and what's expected, and does all kinds of magical things that we're still discovering, right? We're still learning about in terms of neuroscience and what's possible. But all of those functions make it very good at a specific thing for humans, and that is being able to imagine a future, to be able to cultivate a narrative of something other than what has already happened. Something that is qualitatively different from my past experience, that I might not know what to do or how to go about it, but I have an image of it, or I have a storyline for it, or I have this thing that is resonant for me, right? These images in my head, these words in my head, these memories, these dream images, or whatever they are. They don't have to be images, but there's some kind of awareness in my brain of something that I want, that is different to what I have had or currently have. That there's a gap between where I am and the future. And the intellect does that. It represents that, but I don't believe it creates it. I think it gives us a brilliant way of representing it. And this kind of begs a little bit of a deeper question, which is an age-old question. Where does consciousness live? Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," so he would locate consciousness in his head. And there's that picture of the thinker, I think by Rodin, and this man sitting there on the plinth, deep in thought, with his fist on his head, or his head on his fist. Is that the seat of consciousness? I don't think it is. I think it's where we arrest our ideas and our notions of consciousness, and can play with them, can synthesize them, can manipulate them in certain ways. Because when I look around at this, I can't imagine that there isn't consciousness here too, that there isn't an intelligence woven into nature. That's not to say that it came from some spiritual force somewhere else, just that as a quirk of the cosmos, here we are, and these trees and soil and rivers and oxygen and humans and other plants and creatures are interacting. We are part of a relational field of experience, and that if we are able to attune to that intelligence, that field of intelligence, we start to appreciate things in a slightly different way. So we have the rational cognitive intellect, and then moving lower in the body, we might say, so below the neck, we start to become aware of emotions, our habitual responses to certain stimulus. So I see something beautiful, I feel happy. I see something distressing, I feel sad or anxious, right? And that's my part of my consciousness telling me that I am connected to this, that there is a relationship here between me and these experiences that are happening around me. I'm not separate from it. And maybe, we can derive some kind of empathy from that experience of our emotions, where we're like, okay, so if this person is sad, then, this would be an appropriate response in this situation. And beneath that layer of awareness, I would suggest there is something we call the resonant felt sense. So the actual somatic intelligence of the body, the shifts in temperature, the sensations of pressure, of relaxation. I can be aware after a big stressy week of coming to a place on Friday night or the weekend where I've slowed myself down, I've kind of done my meditation and my yoga practice, or been for a run, or maybe it's a bit late in the weekend and I've been out in the mountains, where I feel my body relax, and it's a physiological sensation, it's not an emotion. It gives rise to an emotion. It's like, I'm relaxed, that feels pleasant, I feel a little bit more present, and I understand that what's happening in that moment is that my central nervous system is relaxing. It's not gripped anymore, it's not striving to make something happen, it's not trying to keep up with something or get ahead of something. I'm just able to be in the moment and present, nowhere to go, nothing to do, and it feels really healthy. I feel really whole and grounded and resourceful, and like I found some kind of reset button. So that would be an example of how I know there's something beneath and before emotion. But also, if I can maintain that state, which I spend a lot of my time doing, managing my daily routines, etc., so that I can stay in that very grounded, present, grounded place, we might say, that allows me to sense the world from that place and attune to it from that level without the need for reactive or responsive emotions, and without my head having to be involved in like trying to figure out what's going on. So the trauma therapists, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, who talk about somatic intelligence, talk about the limbic system. So this very deep, ancient layer of knowledge and wisdom, and a kind of way of sensing connection, our relationships, as being the resonant felt sense. So that, there's the sympathetic nervous system, etc., all are involved in that process. We can cultivate that awareness, and we can have conversations with other people. In fact, I believe we are having conversations with other people all the time at that layer, very primal layer, very ancient layer, that gives us really valuable information. And I think our emotions and our intellect are kind of drawing from that deep well of our somatic experience of the world around us all the time. But often in our culture, we don't pay attention to that. In fact, we would rather not know about that, or take responsibility for it, or take the time to figure out what it might be. And then I believe, and I'm not really sure I can articulate this because it's tricky to articulate something that I believe is beneath words, beneath the linguistic layer, the pre-verbal layer, is that I believe that somatic intelligence is how we attune to the natural world around us. I believe that it's that layer that kind of reminds us of our primary source of intelligence, and I believe the human psyche is a function of nature and is structured with this in the same way that nature is structured. So when you say, oh yeah, it's good to go out in nature, I don't think that's as simple as I'm not sat in the office and being bombarded by all these messages. I think there is a natural kind of sense of resonance with the natural world that helps our nervous system regulate, that helps our emotions settle, that helps our thoughts clear. And that's certainly my experience. Before I studied anything of psychology, I had a super stressful job and enjoyed it. It was a great job, but I was running around a lot of the time, and then at the weekends I'd be like, right, I need to go to the mountains. I don't want to go to the pub and get blotto. I want to go to the mountains and use my body and be out in some kind of space that's larger than me and reminds me that I'm a tiny little blip, and be in places that I felt were beautiful. So the preparation for the Deep Nature Immersion here in Scotland, that 3 months, we'll be gathering online once a month, but in between that I'll be sharing little YouTube clips a bit like this, saying, okay, here's an exercise, here's a few ways that we can start to explore these ideas for ourselves, and see how we can bring them together, because some people might be like, oh, I am totally in my emotions all the time, but I don't really think about much. Or some people might be like, oh, I just have this deep sense of connection and sometimes it's overwhelming. And so how do we work with that? How do we start to appreciate and navigate and bring an understanding and a respectful, mindful inquiry to these different aspects of who we are, so that when we arrive in Scotland, we're not trying to learn all that stuff on the hoof. It's not a case of in the first 4 days, right, this and this and this and this, and then off you go, and then how was it? You get time to be with it, that you get time to kind of settle into it, to find your way with it, to say, yeah, that stuff's not important to me, but that really resonated with me, and I'd like to know more about that. And so I might be journaling, I might go out on a long walk in nature one day with no food, just to see what it's like to be out from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m, for instance, without wearing a watch or carrying a phone, or just kind of like wandering around, seeing what other layers of my consciousness are available to me, and how they might support me in just being curious, for instance. What do I start to notice when I'm walking around without a specific outcome, when I don't have a specific goal or a linear intention? What other aspects of me start to evolve and emerge? And from there, from that kind of inquiry, and this is all very emergent, and it's kind of a little bit layered, so it's not like bang, bang, bang. It will be kind of blended, one inquiry into another, so we slowly get used to these ideas, these concepts, these principles and practices, and we find our own way that they're either useful to us or not, right? There's either a bit of the puzzle that works for me, that I needed, that I didn't know I needed, or no, I knew that, and that's cool, and actually it's just affirming of the way that I do things anyway. From that, we'll be looking to cultivate, and it's a case of experimentation, simple daily practices, rituals, we might call them. So times and spaces where we're like, okay, so that's the outside world, and so I'm just hearing a woodpecker. That's the outside world, and it's asking me for all these things, and I either want to do them and I find them fulfilling, or I know they're necessary and I kind of do them because they facilitate other things, or I don't. But there's also this time in the day where I turn everything off, where I settle in and settle down, where I am just here for myself with a capital S, and I'm kind of in a listening and an appreciation mode, and maybe with some gentle inquiries. Maybe people might call that mindfulness, maybe people would call that meditation. It can be moving, it can be still, but it's the quality of the intention and understanding how we come into that place of connection and awareness with ourselves, because we're all different. So I know for myself, it takes me about 20 minutes, especially if I've had a busy day, for my nervous system to regulate, and for me to be like, right, I can settle in, I can settle down. Maybe a cold shower does that for me, helps me do that rapidly. Maybe going for a run, at the end of a run, I'm in that state already, so I'm going, okay, now would be a good time to sit and meditate, because my body, my physiology is ready for that. So we've all got our different ways, but though that is really a key part of what happens in incorporation. So after the Deep Nature Immersion here in Scotland, we go back to our lives, and we will continue our conversations for 3 months. It's a 6-month program, And there will continue to be kind of feedback in between, and as I said, little YouTube videos like this, and maybe some supportive emails or some resources. Maybe there's a film to watch that relates to what's happening for people, that might give further insight or different examples of similar kinds of things. But that daily practice, that provides us a landing pad for when we return, so that we're not trying to develop those practices whilst we need them the most, which is in the first kind of year after the Deep Nature Immersion. Right, when we're like, okay, these really deep things are waking up in me, and I need to find a place in my life and a space in my life where I can be present to them, whatever that means for you. But there is some intention to cultivate a meaningful relationship with the deeper aspects of your consciousness that you have invited, rather than inviting them, imagining this is just some kind of sheep dip program, and you can tell your buddies, yeah, I did a 4-day fast, it was really cool, but nothing actually changed for you. Or trying to force the change, trying to trying to use willpower alone. The preparation phase really helps us, so that we trust it, so that we're like, oh cool. So during the Deep Nature Immersion, I can use that practice if I want to. And I understand it can evolve, it can change as my needs change. Maybe 20 minutes a day is fine, maybe 20 minutes twice a day is fine, maybe 2 hours in the morning is what I need. Maybe 5 minutes with a cup of tea is where I'm going to begin and ease my way into it. Who knows? But that when we come back from Scotland, when we return to our lives and the world that's waiting for us, we have a place for ourselves where we're like, okay, I'm going to honour the inquiry and the experience that I've just had. And I'm going to keep integrating that process, and I understand I am cultivating my own process for future changes as they continue to happen. So next time I meet some aspect of my life that's asking more of me than I think I've got from up here, I'm like, aha, but I have all these other layers of resource, and I know how to invoke them, and I know how to harness them, and I know how to embody them. And we're not looking for perfection. It's never perfection, that's for sure. But we're looking to understand and appreciate these different kinds of intelligence. We're looking to be able to understand ourselves as part of a relational field that we call nature, an unfolding experience that's organic, that's changing, that's growing, and build confidence in ourselves in being able to make conscious choices about how we do that, what our motivations are, what our particular outcomes are for our lives, and to build a sense of faith in that, into this sense of faith in that our psyche is a powerful presence in our lives, and it's operating anyway, mostly unconsciously for most people, and its neglect causes us to suffer, and we don't need to. We can engage in this creative, generative process of turning to face it, inviting certain aspects of it for specific reasons, each in our own way, and learning to honor them. So that's why the preparation phase is important. So we kind of ease our way in, and we're not, kind of like parachuting in, trying to solve some problem that we're like, okay, this is the beginning of a lifestyle change, right? I'm not framing this as there's a problem to solve. There might be issues that need addressing, but more than that, those issues are likely a call to something larger, and we're looking for that inquiry. What is this telling me? What is trying to wake up in me, and of which this issue is a symptom? So we're not looking at it allopathically, not trying to fix the symptom and then get back to normal. We're kind of like, oh right, okay, so normal, what does that mean? How do I shift my baseline of what normal is? In rewilding circles, you hear people talk about baseline, shifting baselines. And what they're talking about is the loss of natural habitat over hundreds of years. And we just get used to it. So if you don't know what an intact woodland looks like, you might drive past, as I did when I first moved to Scotland, drive past these beautiful stands of Caledonian pines, Scots pines, and you'd see them and think, wow, look at that, it's a beautiful forest. And then you spend 10 minutes with an ecologist and they say, yeah, it's a shame it's dead. And you're like, but it's not dead, it's thriving. It's like, there's all these beautiful trees. And they're like, yeah, but what's missing? And you know, for me, you kind of stand there for a minute and you look at it and you're like, nothing, looks fine. And they say, well, there are no young trees, right? So this is a plantation, and there are loads of herbivores in the area that eat all the saplings that would otherwise have grown. And so when these trees die, they'll all fall over and there'll be nothing there because there's no regeneration. It's not looking after itself. It's not able to. There's an imbalance here. Something is being kept down that needs to grow. So, you know, and we're like that. We get used to the compensating habits. We get comfy with who we are, basically. And it's not to say that the WildMind Deep Nature Immersion is there to make us uncomfortable, but there to reframe our discomfort and our discombobulations and be like, okay, I wonder what it would be like to cultivate some kind of flow in my life, some kind of structure, some kind of way of inhabiting my days that really helps me put a foundation underneath the things that I want to achieve and I want to, you know, embrace in my life, the things I want to create, essentially. So that I'm resourceful, so that I'm resilient and flexible and open and creative and present. And, you know, I know when I need time out and I know when I need to push myself a little bit harder and have faith that that's okay. I'm not going to fall over or become overwhelmed. So, yeah, that's why the preparation is important and significant in the cohorts that I've been through previously. The first time I did a 3-month lead-in, I was kind of, I wonder if it'll make a difference. I wasn't really sure. Kind of felt like intuitively it might, but I didn't realise the significance of that, of the impact of that preparation time, allowing people to, you know, attune to their travelling companions and start to build a little bit of trust and relationship and be inspired by them. I feel a sense of kind of like a little bit of a tribe, not one that we're going to abandon ourselves to or start any group thinking processes, that's for sure, but one that's going to support our individual intention. That we feel seen and that we feel witnessed in that inquiry, and that's really important, especially for incorporation, that we're like, you know, there are other people in the world who are having the same experience as me, that are kind of struggling with these little bits and pieces of it as we find our way, and thank goodness we have this longer experience of getting to know each other and supporting each other and knowing what works for us as individuals and a group. And yeah, I don't think there's anything I really need or want to say about that at the moment. So preparation helps us align with our intention. Actually, that's an important thing. That process of, you know, getting to know other people and being inspired by them and learning to cultivate our own sense of presence and practices helps us cultivate our intention for when we're out in Scotland. It really gives shape and depth and a sense of resonance for that, so that when we're here, we're not like, oh, I'm not sure, it's not really this, it's not really. We might be, but even if it's like that, we trust that, right? That we understand that's how it's supposed to be, and we're not anxious about it. We're not trying too hard. We're not trying to force something. So in that 3 months, people will write a letter of intention, where try and put down on a sheet of paper, you know, up to kind of 200 words, nothing massive, about this is where I am, this is where I've been, these are the lessons I've learned, this is the wisdom I've gained, these are the the holes I've fallen in, and this is what I'd like. And there's a way of doing that and entering that process. It gives one kind of answer if we do it with just our head, and it gives a completely different kind of answer if we do it from our body. If we include our body in that conversation, I might say. And one seems to be very, as the intellect does, very rational and linear, and it's a list of wonderful things that we're going to create, and we're kind of inflating ourselves and powering up, and we're going to push through it, like the Dave Goggins kind of style. And then there's another way of doing it, which is more poetic, which is more resonant, and which, instead of being related to a specific context in our lives, it has a deeper sense of possibility in it that is about our lives as a whole. So there's a deeper, perhaps we might say a more universal truth to those words. And it's very clear to me, and this isn't being prescriptive, so please don't interpret it that way, but it's very clear to me on the occasions where the group holding a specific intention with integrity to support each other, to be present, to be listening to each other properly for what I might call the bass notes, to be able to gently and gracefully mirror and reflect each other, so that we know that we've been heard, and we understand that often we have to say things out loud before they even start to make sense to us, and having other people gently reflect and say, yeah, this is what I heard, and this is how, when you say that, it affects me. So we understand relationship. When we've got that kind of conversation starting to bubble up, and starting to naturally appear from these deep sources of wisdom that we've all got inside of ourselves. We haven't got them, we haven't lost them, we just neglect them. That helps people access that deeper layer within themselves that can speak the truth. As I might say, if I think about this as the rider and the body as the horse, we start speaking from the horse's mouth. And when people name a deep truth they've been carrying for a long time and perhaps didn't know, or didn't feel they had permission to share or speak out loud, for whatever reason, they cry. There's a sense of that's the truth. It's that simple, and it's usually very few words. It's usually like a dozen words, a couple of sentences, and it's enough. And that can change everything. So be aware that the WildMind Deep Nature Immersion and the principles and practices of WildMind Deep Eco-Psychology, this sense of embodiment, this sense of becoming present, remaining present, trying to cultivate this awareness that there's really nowhere to go and there's nothing to do. And if we are going to go somewhere and do something, then it's coming from a really congruent, deep place of intention that we're clear about and that we're excited by. There's a sense of fulfillment to it. We can see the possibilities for it as it continues to cascade forward. Those bigger, more significant changes that become truly generative are very subtle. They are very subtle because they come from a very deep place, and they're not there to prove anything. They're not trying to outdo anybody. Then we understand we're not in competition with anybody. That we're here as unique humans for an undisclosed amount of time, in a profoundly complex and beautiful and often terrifying universe, and we get to choose the quality of the relationship we have with that. And deep down inside of us, we kind of know what we need and want. We kind of need and know what we're lacking. We kind of need and know what we need to turn down a bit and let go and release, old patterns, old behaviors that are kind of hindering us, and we're kind of clinging on to them because at least we know them. And it's not until we find something deeper that can kind of absorb those less mature aspects of us and compost them and turn them into something more distilled, more elegant, more powerful, more authentic, I think is the word I'm looking for. We generally get a little bit stuck and start to circle around, shuffle the deck chairs, keeping ourselves busy, but without not really knowing why. So understand this isn't a process that is there to manufacture intense emotional states and catharsis. Sometimes they happen, but it's always a question of the quality of the space that we're creating is what kind of sets the tone of our travel, and therefore the incorporation process afterwards. We understand that we've had that experience and that it's available to us, and then we organize our lives so that the WildMind Deep Nature Immersion, as a process, not just our intention but as a process, also becomes an integrated part of how we show up for ourselves, our families, our communities, etc., etc., in whatever way we feel is best for us to do that. And also in that preparation, having said there was nothing more I wanted to say, I seem to have found some other things to say, so thanks for bearing with me. But also in that preparation, if we have certain resources, certain practices, certain understandings, our spiritual practice, our whatever it is, there will be archetypal resources in those that we want to integrate, we want to enhance, we want to integrate, we want to embody more of that stuff. They are really, really welcome. Really, really welcome. And it's up to us in that preparation process to be like, okay, so this has worked for me this far, but it doesn't seem to be getting me where I want to go now. Does it need a bit of an upgrade? Does this need a bit of a revisit? As an exploration, we're not looking to cut anything off at the root and throw it out and burn it as if it never had any value. We are looking to honor what has happened in our lives and make sense, and even if we can't make peace with it, just appreciate that there's some kind of intelligence in it somewhere, and our job is to creatively be able to harness that which is useful from those past experiences, even if we don't like them. We can see maybe that without that thing having happened, I wouldn't have had this experience, and that's actually been meaningful for me and helpful for me, even though it may be painful at the time. We're looking to harness that kind of stuff and bring it forward. That's part of the journey. So if you're like, well, I think in these ways and I've got these understandings and these ideas and they won't fit there, we're dealing with consciousness, human consciousness, and it's a process of honoring that and finding meaning in that, without letting what might be compensatory mechanisms in the psyche, our kind of baselines, holding us back. So that's part of the inquiry. This works for me, this never really worked for me, but I've done it because I inherited it from this situation or this person or etc., whatever it is. And it's that kind of sifting and sorting. So that 3-month preparation is when a lot of that stuff kind of happens in the background. Once we're like, okay, yeah, I'm going in this direction, and I'm going to keep showing up to meet myself on the way. I said at the beginning I was going to use the word transformational, and it's taken me a long time to say that. I think it's the first time I've made that claim. But I have seen over the years people quit lifelong addictions. I've seen people move country, understanding that they moved a long time ago and that part of their life is done, and they need to move back to their homeland for whatever reason. I've seen people leave toxic relationships that they've been enmeshed in for many years, find the courage to do that and set clear intentions for what kind of relationship they would like to be in, and within a year they've, surprise, they've been on that journey, which has continued. I've seen people reconcile with suicide of their parents when they were younger and be able to meet that in their psyche and choose to live when they had become chronically ill as a consequence of that trauma when they were younger, and integrate that, or begin to integrate that in a meaningful way, and find a much deeper, richer sense of compassion for themselves, for their parent, for their life at large. And that foundational stuff, those foundational things, change everything for people. So that is what I mean by transformation. I don't mean a big bolt from the sky and all of a sudden everything's different. I mean, transformation in relationship to what I would call deep structure systemic change. So from the ground up, from within, moving out, and that there is a creative intention within it, that we are not sitting there every day thinking, what have I got to do today to get it right? We have a sense of trust in ourselves and our process of becoming that we want to honor, that we are glad to honor, that we feel aligned with, that feels authentic for us. I know people who've been in careers, woken up to the fact that they were following a parent in their career path and been like, oh, actually, I don't want to be a fighter pilot. That's not my job. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm more of a creative person. I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to do something else. I've seen people, who've been in very difficult situations, have left with kids, all kinds of very, very difficult situations, and feeling that they'd lost all of their worth and confidence, and being really out at sea, start to find a sense of movement, a sense of, oh no, actually I'm okay, actually it's okay, sometimes it's difficult, but actually it's okay, and I'm gonna actually row, and I'm gonna kind of take hold of the rudder, and I'm gonna learn to sail. I'm not just gonna be thrown around on the ocean anymore. I'm gonna learn the ways of the ocean, and I'm gonna enjoy it. And all kinds of other creative things. People make art, and poetry, and land art that people make during the process, where they're out in these wild places in Scotland, along the coast. Infinite beautiful creations from natural objects have appeared on sand dunes and in the forests and places like that. So if it's of interest to you, please just drop me an email, connect@pauljhell.com. Check out the website. I'm constantly updating it and rewriting it. It's such a powerful process. It never really, I never feel like I've ever really got the descriptions right in terms of words, because it's such a primal creative process emerging, and it really is for other people to speak about it. And I understand why people don't want to write about it, because it's so deeply personal. But boy, I wish I could share some more of those stories in depth, because they are really powerful and inspiring. So that's the preparation phase. As I say, if you're interested, we begin in March, and drop me an email. Okay, thanks a lot.